2022 appears to be the year that the NBA will end the one-and-done era, allowing 18-year-olds back into the NBA draft. High schoolers have been drafted into the NBA in the past, but the one-and-done rule has transformed college basketball prep recruiting as well as the NBA itself. So if 18-year-olds were allowed back into the league, how would that work? First, a look back. In the early years of the NBA draft, a player was required to complete his 4-year college eligibility before entering the league. In 1969, Spencer Haywood, a talented big man from the University of Detroit, decided to go pro after his sophomore season. He ended up signing in the ABA, which didn't have an age restriction. But a year later, he decided to take his talents to the NBA and was signed by the Seattle Supersonics, even though the team knew he wasn't 4 years removed from high school and thus wouldn't be eligible. In order to gain entrance into the league, Haywood took his fight all the way to the Supreme Court in 1971, where the justices ruled 7-2 against the NBA. The ruling allowed players to enter the NBA draft if they could give evidence of financial hardship to the league office. In 1975, Darryl Dawkins and Bill Willoughby were granted hardship waivers and entered the NBA draft after high school. The following year, the hardship requirement was scrapped in favor of players dropping their college eligibility. But it wasn't until 20 years later when the influx of high school players in the league truly began. From 1995, when Kevin Garnett left Farragut Academy in Chicago to become the Minnesota Timberwolves' number 5 overall pick in the NBA draft, until the NBA changed the rules in 2006, 42 players jumped straight from high school to the NBA. But for every league MVP that came from that group, like Garnett, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James, there were so-called busts, like Kwame Brown and Eddie Curry. With that uncertainty, as well as the notion that players weren't physically or emotionally ready for the NBA, the league and the players' union agreed to a deal where players had to be at least 19 years old and 1 year removed from high school before entering the draft. Some players went overseas for that year, like Brandon Jennings, while most of the top recruits became known as one-and-dones, attending college mostly because the NBA blocked their admission to the league. John Calipari recruited them, first with the likes of Derrick Rose at Memphis, and later with players like Anthony Davis and Karl Anthony Towns at Kentucky. Duke and Mike Krzyzewski took in recruits like Kyrie Irving, Marvin Bagley, and Zion Williamson. Kansas and Bill Self pulled in the likes of Andrew Wiggins, Joel Embiid, and Josh Jackson, fully aware their players were only going to attend those programs for 1 season just to abide by the NBA's requirement. So what would happen if 18-year-olds were allowed back into the draft? The first hurdle comes in planning. One GM told ESPN that there were a run on teams trying to grab 2022 draft picks at the trade deadline, hoping to find that future young phenom. NBA teams would also need to be allowed to scout top prospects at a younger age. Teams are also asking for more medical transparency, as agents have made a habit of withholding medical information to guide players toward their preferred destinations. Talks between the NBA and the union seem to be heading toward the abolishment of the one-and-done rule. Would it impact the college game? If more top prospects are opting to skip the NCAA entirely, then clearly yes, there would be an impact. But how that manifests in terms of fan interest, television viewership, and recruiting styles remains to be seen. If the one and done is in fact done, that's how it would work.